Welcome back here to Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora on WakeUpCallDT.com, your one-stop sports shop, mixlr.com/WakeUpCallDT, as well as on Facebook Live on Facebook.com/LiveNowDT. We're inside of the Cafe Kubal Studios with awesome locations all throughout Syracuse, New York, as well as a mobile cafe and local delivery, which is free to Onondaga County. Right here on the other screen is Jason Lucas. Jason and I have known each other for a very long time, and I appreciate this man. We met in the sports world, and now I consider him a brother. So it is an honor and a privilege to have him on the show. The only thing that's not here is Tom Brady wearing his own jersey that he took from Chris Godwin, because the Jaguars are here, the Miami Dolphins are there, and I'm wearing a Jaguars jersey that I don't have to throw out because it's mine. So you can see it says Covino. It's for my G-mama and my grandfather. It's the one jersey that I didn't have to put in a pile and light on fire. So, Jason, how you doing today?
I'm pretty good. I guess all them things do have an expiration date. I got Cam Wake behind me, and that one expired, I think, 2 or 3 years ago. So,
yeah, I mean, I guess. Well, I think the Dolphins. I mean, they know it. They know it more better than most when it comes to shipping people out. So,
for sure,
they've been yard sailing it since Dan Marino, so that's good.
Yep. Yeah, pretty much. With the sign in the front yard.
Absolutely. So, I mean, there's a lot of stuff to talk about, but first and foremost, are you surprised that there is a college football season? What are your thoughts on the fact that we're actually trying this thing right now?
I mean, I figured from the beginning they'd give it a shot. I think the part I couldn't have predicted was like the Big Ten, Pac-12, just being like, nope, we're not doing that. And
yeah, I think that was the commissioner of the Big Ten screaming just now.
It was.
He's like, I quit. Stop. I don't want it. No, I don't want to do it. I'm not going to do
it. That's why it's risky to do a show with me. You'll get a lot of screaming in the background.
That's okay. I'm not married anymore to who I was married to. I don't have to worry about the screaming in the background. We're good.
Nope. I think I hear spankings going on too.
Yeah, that's okay. Don't have those in my house either. So I mean, are you surprised? What can you say about college football?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I thought they would go from day one with at least like what UCF is doing, the 25%. I figured they would do that because you can space people out in these big stadiums pretty much all over the stadium at 25%. Yeah. I mean, I think I was surprised last night to turn the TV on and the Navy game was nobody. They didn't let anybody into that game. I think that was the biggest surprise for me of the whole thing. Like, I was pretty sure they were going to play one way or the other because the kids obviously have a lot invested in it. I think the NCAA made a good move making this kind of like a free year, like a free pass year. So if you want to keep playing next year, you can. If you want to go to the draft, you can. Otherwise, you're just going to have your sophomore, junior, or senior year over again.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting to see how it happened. I mean, I don't think ever in my life, or in anybody's life for that matter, that I would see the college football climate be that there are some conferences that are not playing and nobody's allowed to play in the conference, like the Big Ten and the Pac-12. Then there's conferences that are playing where everybody's playing, like the American, like the ACC, the Big 12, the SEC. And then there's some conferences where the conference isn't playing, but they told the teams they could play, like Austin Peay. And then there's some conferences that are playing where they told the teams they don't have to play, like Old Dominion. So there's 4 different things going on. There's no conference play. None of you can play. We're all playing as a conference. Then we're playing as a conference, but you don't have to. We're not playing as a conference, but you can. Hard to keep up with, but there's 76 out of 130 that are playing. So the majority is still out there.
Yeah, so it's pretty crazy. Like, obviously I always look at everything from the UCF point of view. I think they're like 25% chance of making the college football playoff with the current schedule they have. Because if they don't run the table with the schedule they have, I mean, Georgia Tech should be the biggest challenge, and that's their first game. I think they'll be able to come out of the blocks and take care of them. But then after that, I know the home schedule is like Temple, Tulane, Tulsa, and the only challenge, Cincinnati. So it should be a pretty easy year for them to just run the table. I mean, I don't even see anybody I think can beat them the way they are, especially coming here in the heat.
And I want to keep with the American Athletic, the AP as well as the coaches poll had votes for multiple teams inside of the American two teams that made both polls, UCF, your team, and your alma mater, as well as Cincinnati. What are your thoughts on both of them making it? And, the media nationally was almost completely in line with my picks as well, as far as 1 through 11. Now that it's all one conference, no divisions this year, with UConn being out of it. So we were almost completely the same in our picks. And I picked UCF 1, Cincinnati 2. And I was wondering what the media was going to do. And they agreed with me. They agreed, we agreed as a whole that UCF would come out of this on top, Cincinnati right behind them. What do you think about UCF and Cincinnati being up here? Is there any surprise? What's your take on that?
I mean, I think those are the two best teams in the conference, and they have been for the past 2 or 3 seasons. I mean, Memphis snuck by Cincy last year because it was a road game for Cincy. So I think, they are the two best teams in the conference, the two most experienced teams for the, big games and, facing each other. I think that there's some familiarity with the coaches now because it'll be the 3rd year that the two coaches are playing against each other. Okay, baby, I love you. She's Elsa now. But yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of familiarity there.
I think that's actually like Mark Emmert too. When they were asking him questions about what to do with Corona, he was walking around going, "I'm Elsa."
Yeah.
He's like,
Who's
"No, Mark
Elsa?
Emmert here. I'm Elsa." No.
Yo, Mark, if you're watching, I'm breaking your heart right now and taking Tom Brady.
Oh my goodness. Look at you.
But yeah, man, I think those two teams are far and away the best in the American this season. I don't even see anybody messing with either one of them until they play each other.
Well, and the thing is, I had a UCF, Cincinnati, Memphis, SMU, Navy, Houston, East Carolina, Temple, USF, Tulane, and Tulsa. And the media ended up going as a whole, agreeing with me on UCF, Cincinnati, Memphis, and then having SMU, Navy, and then they put Tulane a little bit higher, Houston, Temple, Tulsa, East Carolina. So really, Tulane and East Carolina were the big differences. I would say, in the biggest difference in the jumps, but our top 5 were the same. What do you think about that? UCF, Cincy, Memphis, SMU, Navy. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, after watching Navy last night, I don't even know if they'd be a top 5. I mean, I think Coach Ken made a huge mistake. They pretty much made it public. They didn't even tackle during their camp. So they might not even be ready to go when it's time to go here in conference play. So, I mean, they're the teams that I got to see last year. I mean, I think Temple was a talented team, good defensive team, talented all across the board, really. They're a good, tough opponent. Sneak them in there. Tulane had a little bit of talent as well. Tulane had a fairly good season last year for them.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. Navy would really have to strap up to keep that 5 spot, but I think the rest of it's pretty accurate.
Yeah, and I think what's really crazy is to see Navy in their opener. They made changes. Brian Newberry coming on last season to help out in their defense, and there was no defense in that game, blown out by BYU, an independent school. The other question to kind of bring up here in the grand scheme of things, because I talked to the commissioner of the American a lot, Mike Oresco.
Right.
He's a regular on the show, and I always appreciate his time. I firmly believe there's going to be a 12th school. I think they're going to go back to divisions and have the American East and the American West. What school makes most sense to you? Is it trying to coerce Army because you have Navy? Is it BYU, who we had talked about that before? But I think if you're looking at all sports, which I think you can't do just football only, I think you have to look at everybody to not run into a problem again. I think a full member school, in my opinion, that I truly believe feet to the fire, if I had to pick one right now, is Buffalo because of men's and women's basketball as well as their football team. I would lean on Buffalo's side. What do you think?
Please God, no, not Buffalo. We don't need to be sending our kids from UCF and USF up to there in, late November or whenever it would be.
That's right, baby.
I mean, I've always thought Boise State would be awesome to have in our conference. I think them and UCF are the two schools that have fought the man, I guess you'd say, the most.
Yeah.
So I've always thought Boise State more than anything, just because they're fighting the same battle we all are.
Yeah, I think, and that's right, and I think if you put Boise State and UCF and Cincinnati all in the same place, and then Navy when they start to shape up, and the Memphis team, Memphis and SMU, you start putting all this together, it's what's the argument? Because Boise State was the UCF before UCF.
Exactly.
They were the team that kept knocking on the door saying, is it, can we play? And then you see them play in the BCS championship, and Boise State went undefeated, and what'd they do? They said,
They won.
well, you'll have a share of the championship, even though you didn't get to play in the game, which
Yeah.
is, which is crazy. But also with UCF, the NCAA, people give UCF, flack for calling themselves national champions, but the NCAA awarded them as co-champions that year, even though they didn't play in the college football playoffs. So they did the same thing with Boise State. I think if you don't want to see these kind of, you're a champion, even though you didn't play in the championship game, let them play. And as I've made the statement before, can you score less than 0, which Ohio State did against Clemson? Can you be more embarrassed than Washington was against Alabama or Notre Dame against Clemson or even Alabama against Clemson recently? So, I mean, unless UCF can score negative points, I don't think their game would be as bad. Maybe it would be just, I don't know. But, I mean, if Ohio State's not scoring any points and Washington is not doing much and the Pac-12 is not even registering in the college football playoff, and they're in the Big 12 sending teams, but they're not winning, and and then even the Notre Dames are getting completely embarrassed. At some point, you got to put UCF and somebody from the American in there, because last time I checked, you can't score less than 0.
Right. Yeah. And what I think, this thought just came to me now, because UCF, the way they are, nobody will want to schedule them anymore.
Yeah.
So if anybody was ever going to do it, it's got to be a team that everybody's looking at that's not going to be very good. And then you got to have the kids, that they're recruiting. They're looking at the schedule coming up. They're like, oh, it'd be nice to play against Oklahoma, Alabama, whatever, impressive resume teams.
Yeah.
And then they somehow rise up that season and beat them. And then that resume would be, we beat 3 or 4 ranked teams that are these so-called world-beating teams. That'd be about the only way you could even have the resume to do it, because UCF this season that they went undefeated the first time, they beat Memphis, who had only had 1 loss until they played UCF a second time.
Yeah.
So they had 2 losses. They were both to UCF. They beat USF, who had only lost to Houston, which that's De'Ara King at Miami now. And then they went and beat Auburn, who they had lost a few games, but the wins they had were Alabama and Georgia when they were number 1. So, I mean, I thought that was an impressive resume, but USF was unranked because why? I don't know. They were 10-1. They shouldn't have been unranked.
Right.
And Memphis had the 1 loss only to UCF, and then it took a second loss to them. So it was just crazy that they weren't even able to get in with that resume. And then they did it a second year, went undefeated a second season.
Yeah.
And still couldn't get in. So,
and it's funny, when they lost to LSU after going 25-0 over 2 years, when they lost to LSU, everybody was like, see, they suck.
Yeah.
And I'm like, they went 25-0. They beat the SEC once. They only lost by 8 to LSU. They didn't get blown out by any stretch of the imagination.
With our backup quarterback.
Right. So you look at all this.
After losing the number 6 guy in the Heisman race. Yeah.
Exactly. And the funny thing is, everybody goes, well, the 4th string DBs were out there against the backup quarterback for UCF. And it's like, listen, at the end of the day, you play who's out there. If LSU, if LSU wins, then it's like, whatever. If UCF wins, then there's got to be an asterisk. There's got to be a reason. Somebody's got to have a problem with it. They want a recount. They're looking for hanging chads, in the state of Florida. So
exactly right.
It's crazy to me how there's this UCF conundrum where if they were to stink and win 2 games and they tank so that Alabama or Georgia or somebody will play them in the regular season, and so they tank on purpose so that they can play those big games and nobody wants to play them, and then they beat them and then they have to go undefeated. It's this conundrum of how are you supposed to do it, because you keep telling them they got to be good, and they are, and they're great. And, they're great at times. They've had some stuff recently here, but they've also been without they've also been without Mackenzie Milton, who again, like you said, Heisman guy. They've been out with him for a couple seasons. But you look at this UCF issue and the fact that if they beat everybody, the American's not good. But then they look at Notre Dame and strength of schedule. They look at this and that. Well, when Notre Dame made it to the college football playoff, they were 10-0, and people are telling me, well, on paper, Notre Dame was playing talent. On paper, they played one ranked team, Stanford, and they beat them. USC wasn't good that year. The only two teams they blew out a couple teams. One of them was Syracuse without Syracuse's starting quarterback. They barely beat Vanderbilt. They barely beat Ball State. It was awful. Yeah. And so you look at all these things in Notre Dame, and then you say to UCF, well, your conference isn't strong enough, but then Notre Dame's not in a conference, and then you have this issue now that you've accepted them at 12-0. So now is the conversation, if they play good on paper, but the teams aren't ranked, which is the same thing that UCF has done and not gotten any credit for, have you now created this issue where if Notre Dame goes 12-0, you have to consider them for the college football playoff because you let them in, so that's a slippery slope. But it's like you put conference up against UCF. Notre Dame doesn't have a conference. You say on paper these teams are good, but they're not ranked, and that doesn't help out UCF. The arguments against UCF are the same arguments they use for other teams, and that is the issue in college football.
Yeah, and I'll tell you something else that's frustrating. So last night, right before they started that Navy game Navy-BYU game, they put up this. I'm not sure how well you can see this. Can you see any of these names on this list? Can you see them? Or is it blurry?
Not really.
Okay, no problem. So this is a list of returning quarterbacks, notable returning quarterbacks. Trevor Lawrence, of course, Justin Fields, but Ohio State's not playing this season, are they? Sam Howell from UNC, Sam Ellinger from Texas, who is like borderline as anything, Ian Book, another borderline, Kyle Trask from Florida, Keaton Slovis from USC, Jaden Daniels from ASU, Arizona State.
Yeah.
Brock Purdy from Iowa State. Tanner Morgan, I don't even know who that is, from Minnesota. And Kellen Mond, who I think is a decent, okay quarterback, kind of moves in the pocket, whatever. Where's Dylan Gabriel?
Yeah.
He's the quarterback of the number 21 team in the country, and he's not even on the list. There you go. Right there. Disrespect.
Exactly. They're like, put them in the SEC and they'll lose. And I'm like, well, they've beaten the SEC in recent history. I mean, they lost to LSU by 8. But they
Where's Brady White?
Right.
Where's Brady White?
But that's the thing is, like, for every positive, somebody will scour to find a negative, right? For every guy that comes through and is successful in the NFL even, they'll go and find and say, well, Paxton Lynch from Memphis, he didn't translate. Well, what Notre Dame quarterbacks translated in the last decade? Yeah. So, I mean, there's these questions that come up, and there's not a significant – there's not a good enough answer. And I think that's my biggest issue with it is if you're going to say to UCF, listen, you got to be in a better conference, you got to do this and that. And like I said, Notre Dame's not in a conference. Boise State was banging on the door, and basically people are like, all right, let them in the room, put them in the top 25. No, they don't care about the Mountain West. You know, more often than not, the top 25 AP Coaches Poll, they don't care about the Mountain West, but Boise State's always there. And you'll see Boise State at 16, and UCF will be 17. It'll be 18. Or Memphis won't move. Or Memphis will drop a spot when they win, but Boise State will go up. And it's like you look at some of these, Ohio State will lose a game by 20, and they'll go from like 8 to 9. UCF will win by 10, and they'll go from 17 to 19, or they'll just stay at 17 or 16 for like 4 weeks. And, I mean, it's the same thing with Duke in men's basketball. If Duke beats Citadel, they go to number 1. If Syracuse beats Citadel, they're ranked number 43 in the country. Yeah. So, I mean, there's special rules for certain teams, and it's ridiculous because, I mean, the UCF conundrum is something that we face every single year, and I'm not sitting here being a homer for them in any way. And I know, Jay, I know you went there, but we asked the honest question, which is, if you're not going to have a college football playoff fair for all, then either break division – right, why have it? Either break Division I up, Division I-A up, and let those conferences have a tournament and then have your autonomous 5 and then do something else with Division I AA, make it AAA. I don't know. But, if fair is fair, then let it happen. And to say, well, you have to join another conference. Well, the coach has to coach in another. That's not fair to say to a conference, you have to crumble in order for these teams to succeed, because they're basically telling the American, if you want your teams in, they have to leave your conference and make these other conferences better. And that's not fair to the American, who was screwed more than anybody else in realignment when they were the Big East, when they had 3 teams left: UConn, who was part of it, USF, who wasn't an original, and Cincinnati, who wasn't an original. They had no identity. They rose from the ashes like a phoenix, and they get punched in the face every year for no reason.
For real. And it's like it'll never end. So pretty much, like you said, UConn's out now. I don't know what happened to their passion for football at all, but it's like they don't even care anymore. I'm having concerns for East Carolina. I think they furloughed their coaches at some point and stopped football activities. They've had a lot of, I think, COVID-related issues with that team. But, I mean, and then the crop of the conference, I mean, the roof is just going to the New Year's Six Bowl.
Yeah.
And it's like, here's your reward. You get to play somebody in the top 10. We don't know who. It could be anybody. We're going to send the best team we can to try and kill you so that you don't look good, you know. And that's what they did with UCF when they sent Auburn and LSU. They tried their best to kill them. And I think Memphis played a pretty good Penn State team last year too.
Well, and remember, Memphis played a Penn State team without the man that orchestrated the last 4 years in Mike Norvell, because he was already at Florida State.
True. Yeah. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how they do, Florida State with Mike Norvell. I think Thursday is their first game.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's definitely going to be an interesting place for us to be in. But, I definitely enjoy having the conversation. And for those of you that are watching here, Jay and I had to do this a little bit beforehand because he has my 2 nieces there, and things get a little bit crazy. So if you hear Jay say yesterday or tomorrow and it's already happened, it's not that the man has lost his mind. He's not Rick Grimes, in a hospital coming out of this saying what's happening with the world. It's just the fact that we have to orchestrate these things very well when it comes to kids.
Yeah, no doubt. This actually wasn't bad. Not bad at all.
No, not at all. So, I mean, what are your other thoughts on college football? I mean, the ACC now has Notre Dame for a season. They have, tried to obviously find a way to make Notre Dame happy. They brought him in for all sports except for football, which is the same thing the Big East had done. And now they have them in for the ACC. I think a very easy way to kind of force the hand of Notre Dame is to say, you can't qualify for the college football playoff unless you join a conference. If they did that, then they would assimilate right into the ACC. But is this time, and I put this out there, I actually had the picture of The Bachelor where the ACC is down on one knee and the woman in the dress is Notre Dame. Is it time for the ACC to propose, now that we've had coronavirus and we're in a very unique situation that has forced Notre Dame to join the ACC, is this now a time where they're sharing their money from their home games from NBC and then they're getting some money from the ACC with everything else going on? Is this now a time where the ACC takes advantage of the situation and makes a pitch on saying, I know you want to be single forever. I know you're George Clooney, but just hear me out. If we get married, we get a tax break. Maybe we should do this.
I mean, I don't know, because Notre Dame has been that way for so long.
Forever.
And that NBC thing is pretty autonomous, just to them, just unique, and it's all theirs. It's their own thing. And they, as far as I know, have never had a problem scheduling and, getting whatever game they want. Everybody would want to play them, just for, being able to go to Notre Dame, the storied program that it is, the storied stadium they play in and all that.
Yeah.
I see them kind of just staying where they're at, and the ACC could definitely get on one knee, but they'd have to throw a lot of money out. It wouldn't be like Notre Dame paying to get into the conference. Right. I don't it's normally the team has to pay, the school has to pay to get in. And obviously as a UCF guy, I would rather them be on a knee to my school where we would love to be in the ACC, and you wouldn't have to convince us twice. We would get in there and we would probably rough up 3/4 of your conference by double digits every game. So,
Yeah.
we do the same thing Notre Dame would do, but maybe even better because, as we were just talking about earlier, UCF was probably better than Notre Dame that season. Notre Dame got into the playoff over UCF.
Yeah, well, and I think what would be really interesting, I mean, if I look at it right now, if we looked at if UCF was in the, and this is the thing, I'm a proponent for the American. Again, I don't think they should have to leave a conference. I think it's ridiculous. The poaching the coaches this is the funny thing. They poach the coaches all the time, but the conference isn't good enough. And then they poach the coach the next year, but the conference isn't good enough. And then the Big 12 looks at taking the teams, but the conference isn't good enough. If it's not good enough, why do you keep trying to steal from it and treat it like your farm system?
Yep.
You know what I mean? So we look at so for argument's sake, if UCF was to join the ACC this year, and again, I don't want this to happen because I want the American to be strong, but if UCF was to do it, I would say, just going down the line, I'd put them up against Boston College, call that a win because they got rid of Steve Adazio, 7 bowl games in 8 years, one of the dumbest moves Boston College has ever made. I would give them a win over BC. I'd give them a win over Wake Forest. I'd have them fight to the brink, and if it comes to a scoring battle, I give them a win over Virginia Tech. I give them a win arguably over Bronco Mendenhall in Virginia. I think they go toe-to-toe with Syracuse, speed against speed, and I think that's going to be a game that could be in the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, potentially. So I look at this and say, okay, BC win, Wake win, Virginia Tech win, Virginia win. I'd give them a win over Pittsburgh. We've already seen them play and have really close games. Pittsburgh had to beat them with a trick play. And then I would say, NC State, I would say arguably Miami, and then Georgia Tech. So I got 8 wins for them already. And then Florida State is not what they used to be. Duke, I could argue that –
You own Mike Norvell.
But I could honestly argue that of the 14 teams that are typically in, not including Notre Dame, of the 14 schools in the ACC for football, I can argue UCF beating 10 of them. Yep. And this is a conference that I've covered just as long as I've covered the American. So – I can honestly tell you that. We
schedule one.
What'd you say?
And a hurricane comes every time we schedule an ACC team.
Yeah, I think UCF did some really low-key kind of shade that they threw when they had they had the game against Notre Dame, and it said someday because it said the game was postponed. So, yeah.
Yep.
But it's one of those things where it's just and it's funny to me because if UCF in the American was so bad, then why the one game that the ACC gets together, the one game and like when you talk about these teams having one non-conference game, why do they schedule Liberty and the Citadel? Why don't they schedule UCF in Cincinnati? If they suck, then schedule them. But they won't. It's this middle ground of we don't want to have a non-conference loss, but we also don't want to say that they're good. But they have to be good because you won't play them in I mean, it's like these schools are caught in the middle of what is fair and what is not fair, what is logical, what is illogical. And until somebody changes it, which won't be Mark Emmert because he's the president of the Munchkin Land. I mean, he honestly he's the president of whatever made up believe, I have no idea. I mean, he says he has no control over college football. He can't do anything with college football. So college football is just kind of doing whatever they want. And if the Autonomous Five is in control, then why are the other 5 conferences even trying to be in this overall umbrella? Why don't they just form their own umbrella? And why don't they do it like this? Why doesn't UCF or Cincinnati say, okay, you know what? We're going to play our thing. Y'all play your thing. And whoever beats in the Autonomous Five, we'll play you in the championship of all championships at the end of this thing. We'll have 1 extra game. And if we beat you, you let us in. I mean, I don't know what it's going to take because they were supposed to get blown out in the Fiesta Bowl. They beat Baylor. They were supposed to get embarrassed by Auburn. What did they say? Oh, well, Auburn was tired and they didn't want to play. They were supposed to get blown out by LSU, and they lose by a touchdown and a 2-point conversion.
Yep.
What else do people need to see? And they beat they beat a Pittsburgh team that ends up going on and getting the coastal side of the ACC.
We blew them out, actually.
Right, and Pittsburgh beats on a trick play. So I mean, what does it need? What needs to happen for UCF? I mean, and the thing that I find hilarious is that UCF will lose 1 game, and everybody will go, look, they just lost, they suck. Oh, look, they're not. If they have a season where they go 9-2 and they can't play their 12th game because of a hurricane, which happened a couple times, if they go 9-2,
now a pandemic,
the talking heads out there are going 9-2. that's a crappy team. That team's not even like they should be in like D3. I mean, it's amazing. But if anybody else goes 9-2, if Alabama goes 9-2 and they got a couple games coming up, if Auburn goes 9-2, if Georgia does it, if Clemson does it, we're arguing why they should still be in. If UCF loses 2 games, you'd think they went 0-12.
So let's just throw this out there. In 3 full seasons, so including bowl games, so I'll include the LSU loss, they've lost 4 games. They're 35-4. The 4 losses are by a total of 15 points.
Yeah.
3 of them were last season by a total of 7. So that's really something that's telling in that, yeah, I mean, of course, they're going to lose here and there.
Right.
But when they lose, it's absolutely a football game that everybody's got the channel turned to, and they lose by single digits.
And it's almost like the world is hoping that they lose so that they don't have to answer the tough questions. It's like if UCF will just lose, then we don't have to figure out what, we don't have to talk about it being fair or unfair. It's almost like the committees are just hoping that UCF trips themselves up so that they don't have to answer the questions that they can't answer, because answering the question is just like looking into the camera like they did a few years ago with the NCAA tournament in Syracuse. When they looked into the camera and they directly said, why did Syracuse not make it? And they went, well, the teams, they tried, it was hard, and the work, and they did a good fight, and yes. I mean, you look at the quote, and they let Indiana in, who had like 18 wins. They let Duke in, who had 19. They both got beat in the first round. But it's like they pray that UCF falls so that they don't have to talk about why UCF's not in.
Yep.
So just put them in. And again, if you think that they're going to embarrass themselves, let them do it, because they can't score less than Ohio State did. And they can't look more embarrassing than Notre Dame. If they suck, they're still not going to suck any more than Ohio State and Notre Dame have.
That's for sure.
And I know that people want to kill me for mentioning them with Ohio State and Notre Dame, but those games were absolutely embarrassing. In the Washington game, who wanted to watch Alabama versus Washington? I don't think really UCF won't sell tickets. I think they'll sell more than that game.
Especially because the allotment for the Peach Bowl sold out in about 3 hours.
And UCF typically has been selling out their tickets in a normal year that's not a year where we're dealing with Rona.
Yep.
So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think, I can't wrap my head around the level of disrespect that this team has to take on such a consistent level. And it really is heartbreaking to see this happen, because we always ask why, and there's never an answer, Jason. There's never an answer to why.
And here's the other thing to me is like, the programs you talk about traditionally, the Ohio States, the Michigans, LSU, Auburn, Alabama, Florida, those places that are, they have these giant cathedral stadiums, right?
Yeah.
We've been to games at UCF. Is that not one of the loudest stadiums in the country? If you had to guess, like when you go in there, how loud, and you can't even hear yourself think, that's 46,000. Imagine when Danny White does the expansion, how loud that place is going to be, and how legit it's going to be, like that legit D1 big school feel that UCF's always had when they were in the Citrus Bowl with 70,000 capacity. They're going to be able to move the stadium they're in now up to 60,000 capacity. It's going to be crazy when they do that. It's going to be absolutely insane. It's going to be one of the top 5 experiences in college football for sure. For home
when
field.
I tell people as a broadcaster and as a writer, like for me on my side of it, covering the game, there's nothing cooler than going into their press box, which I like to call body wars or star tours, because you literally sit in the press box, and when the fans start stomping their feet and they start moving on the bleachers, the press box actually moves from like front to back, and you legitimately feel like you're in a simulator, because that's how wild these games are. And I remember sitting there going like, I don't get it. The stadium's beautiful. Now that they have a downtown campus, I think it's the biggest campus in America. So the stadium's beautiful. They got the biggest campus. They've had the top 3 biggest when they weren't the biggest.
Yep.
You have this press box that's an experience. They literally should put on this press box like they put on all the Disney rides. If you're prone to motion sickness, please do not ride the press box.
Yeah.
Essentially, it's such an experience. The stadium is huge. It's so cool. I've been there so many times. The teams are good. The games are fantastic. The video boards are top of the line. I mean, you're in the center of Orlando. You're in the mecca of entertainment and attraction. I don't know why we're still having these conversations, but Jay, I mean, maybe when Mark Emmert steps down from his invisible post, you and I can build a real one and do something with it.
Yeah, wouldn't that be nice? Yeah. I mean, we've been having the same conversation I remember the first time we had it, I was walking out after that USF game in 2017 when UCF had just beaten them.
Yeah.
And we were talking about how they just nobody's going to move them up. Nobody's going to do anything. They're getting ready to play Memphis again. And it started then, and it's the same conversation 3 years later. And I think it'd be even worse if they had won all their games last year because they wouldn't have gotten in again.
Right.
So it's like I'm glad we lost a few and just got the pressure off.
Yeah, it's like a hindrance. It's like if you guys win, you're going to get punished. If you lose, we're going to say that you are who we thought you were. If you win, we're going to say who cares. And
yeah, it was fixed.
Right. And if the loss, if UCF losing is such a like, oh my God, that's the same thing as Alabama. So it's like, how can you take their losses as, oh my God, they're not supposed to lose, but then their wins don't matter? Because you don't do that with Alabama. You don't do that with Georgia. You don't do that with Clemson.
Pitt rushed the field when they beat us, by the way.
I'd rush the field if I beat UCF.
I mean, we felt so big time. When we lost that game, I was like, how cool is that? We have never in our history had somebody charge the field after beating us. Ever.
And they won it on a trick play.
Yeah.
They won it on a trick play. It's not like they won. Again, who is beating UCF by 20, 30, 50 points, It's just – it doesn't make any sense.
1 point loss.
Right. So if you're looking at your screen right now going, Dan, roll tide, roll tide. I'm a roll tide, roll tide. It's like I get it. I understand. I feel you all. I respect.
We're 1-0 against them too.
What'd you say?
We're 1-0 against them too.
Yeah, but that's my thing. I respect all the conferences. I respect all the teams. All I'm asking is for a level playing field. And if you're going to give me some BS excuse, then that better be the same BS excuse for everybody, because if we're not all created equal, if we're all created equal, not treated equal, listen, there was a time when Alabama wasn't great. There was a time when Dabo Swinney, the wide receiver coach, got hired as the head coach of Clemson, stood at the podium, and he said, we're going to win here. I'm going to change this. We're going to be great. And the media laughed in his face.
Yep.
There was a time where a man named Scott Frost came to UCF, and he did real good. Then he left.
His entire staff.
Well, that was short-lived. And then Josh Heupel steps in, and Josh is doing it. And I commend Danny White, the AD of UCF, because he never stops the discussion, and he's going to bang down the door. Boise State is still not in, but it was like, oh, my God, somebody shut up Boise State. Just let them do it. UCF is at that place. And now you talk about Cincinnati. Why are the most viable coaches, why are the biggest names in free agency of coaches, why are they always Luke Fickell, Cincinnati, Justin Fuente, Memphis, Mike Norvell, Memphis, Josh Heupel, UCF, Scott Frost, UCF, on and on and on and on. Why are these names? When Sonny Dykes at SMU now, and before that, Chad Morris, who finally got him to a winning record and back to a bowl game.
We had this guy named Matt Rule in the conference a couple of years ago.
Oh, yeah,
too.
and he's just the head coach of the Carolina
Panthers. Have you heard of him?
Yeah. I love how people come to me now and they go, oh, I hope this college guy who thinks he can do it, Matt Rule. And I'm like, well, he kept Temple good, and he turned around Baylor when their entire athletic department was in shambles. So and Temple is the only –
Now he's coaching Carolina.
Well, here's the thing. Temple is the only team in America that can change their coach every 2 to 3 years, and they keep going to bowl games, and they stay consistent. And they pushed Notre Dame to the brink. They beat Penn State, but everybody wants to say every squirrel gets a nut. Well, then why is the American getting so many nuts? You know what I mean? Like, if every squirrel gets their nut, well, their tree is full. So I don't get it.
I think at the end of the season last year, they had 3 or 4 ranked teams, something like that. 3 or 4 ranked teams, and it was the second most of any conference.
And they trend higher than certain teams that are inside of the conference. They'll be above the Big 12 at times. They'll be above, I mean, like the Pac-12 has been weak lately. And it's funny how like last year they're like, it was a weak year for the American. I was like, well, when it was a strong year, nobody gave them any credit. So why are all these arguments happening? Because if they're good, it's bad, and if they're bad, it's bad.
Yeah.
And if they're in the middle, it's bad. So the reality of it all is let them play the game. Let them embarrass themselves, because I don't think they will. And I think the fear is that they won't, because if UCF beats Alabama on a national stage, what do you do for the rest of the time? Because now that they're in the door, you can't shut them out. And the college football playoff is already too small. They take this is the college football playoff. Alabama, Clemson, another SEC school to be named, and a wild card usually from the Big 12. The Pac-12's out of it. The Big 10's out of it. The American's not even considered. And they say, well, we consider the American. How does UCF end the season 10th or 11th when they're undefeated?
Yeah.
You know, and then we talk about, well, Wisconsin's undefeated. They deserve to be. And I was like, wait a minute. Wisconsin's undefeated. Penn State's undefeated. UCF's undefeated. Well, the Big 10's really difficult. Okay, well, yeah, but when they get to the college football playoff, they don't do anything. So at the end of the day, if you're going to make your argument, make it airtight. You know, what do they say? If you're going to take a shot, you better not miss.
Yep.
Well, the college football playoff has missed numerous times. I'm not saying that Alabama and Clemson are not great. I'm not saying they're not the 2 best teams in the country. I'm saying the dinner table needs to have a few more seats, a few more placemats, and UCF needs to be one of them, because if you're going to punish a team for being 25-0, I don't really know what else they're supposed to do.
Yep, and it's just the same thing, man. Every year, it's like, okay, well, you know, if we go undefeated, what's going to happen? Because really, we can't do any better than that. We can't do any better than who they put in front of us. And oh, you're going to just send us to the New Year's Six? Yay! We've already won 2 of those in 3 trips. So, I mean, we've kind of earned our way. I mean, that's winning 66% of the time against the big boys on a national stage.
Yeah.
And what else do you want? It's like you're saying, what else do you want? And for us, it's just, okay, let's go to these games. We're going to blow all these teams out. I mean, by halftime, most of the students are out of the stadium at UCF because it's so dang hot, and we're up by 40 points at halftime. So what's even the reward for staying? We don't think we're going to the championship or anything.
Can't do anything better than undefeated. I mean, it's the reality of where we sit at. But, you know, Jason, you and I will continue to have this conversation. We'll continue to beat this drum because it's a song that needs to be played. I appreciate the fact that college football is back more than anything else. I hope we can do it safely and soundly. And more than anything, I hope that I can jump through this screen onto the other one and actually be in my second home of Florida sooner than later, because I haven't seen you in, I think it's now 15 years. And I miss you. And me not going to Disney from last December till now, I've had people ask me if I'm okay. I at some point, I think people are going to start putting me on their couches. They're going to let me talk about my problems. People are worried about me up here, but hopefully I'll get down there soon.
Hope so, buddy. We miss you. Can't wait to see you.
I hope so too. Thank you so much, brother.
Yep.